Welcome to the seventh day.
Great.
Great.
Let's have our cameras open so we see
Yes.
how is your Sunday there. I think people from the US are joining early morning, so it's their early morning Sunday.
So, Piyush, I started my Sunday.
Started your Sunday.
And how is it?
So we will wait for 2 more minutes
Yes.
and we will mute people.
If you want to chat a bit about how the session is going or any feedback to us, you can always unmute yourself now, talk to us about it.
Yeah.
Anything that you want to tell us.
I'm a bit unclear. I would like to know how much of the recording is going to be available. I hate to sit here and take snapshots all the time for stuff that's interesting.
I think the complete recording is going to be available of all 10 days of the whole session.
It's already available, George. So if
Yeah.
you're in a WhatsApp group, then I'm daily sharing the recording link, and it is the same link with a password.
With a password. Sure.
Ah, okay. So just go to my WhatsApp and hit the link and the password.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Now I can relax and snooze.
Absolutely.
No,
Absolutely.
I'm kidding.
You don't need to take
Yeah.
snapshots. Everything is there. And you
Yeah.
also might see our after the session discussions in some of the recordings where we forgot to
because we
stop.
forget to stop the recording.
I'm sure you didn't say anything bad. So
Oh, I
Okay.
think we
Yeah,
are
I'll do-
6-1 right now. I think we'll start over to you, Piyush. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
So. Two people have. Okay, so I welcome you all on the 7th day of Visuals at Work Bootcamp. I still feel that it's first or second day because my energy and my team's energy is so high, and we are learning daily something new. So to me, it feels like we just started, but then the reality is that it's the 7th day of the bootcamp, and I welcome you all on this pleasant Sunday. It's a little rainy and sunny at the same time in the Netherlands. They say the Dutch weather changes more than a lady's mood. So it keeps changing moods, sometimes raining, sometimes sunny. With this, I'll start. So again, as we always tell you, when you are posting your live scribes or pictures, tag us on social media on Instagram with hashtag visuals at work. And if you are posting on Facebook, then tag us by writing visuals at work bootcamp. I think it will be a great idea if you guys can take your selfies as well, maybe with your laptop here and a selfie like this, because that's the only way we can see how you look like. Otherwise, we all are behind the screens. So just take a selfie like this and also post it. That will be fabulous to see in what kind of environment you are sitting in.
You can actually post it in our page itself. In Facebook, you can start posting in our page already.
That's also possible.
Yeah.
And quick ground rules, be comfortable. It's a Sunday, grab a cup of coffee or chai with you. If you have a headset, then it's perfectly fine. And today you definitely should have paper and pens and markers with you. Bring it as many as you can, because today is something special. And we will be muting everyone on for your mics. So if you have any questions, then put a question mark Q and then put up your questions, and we'll be taking them during the session and at the end as well. And if you have anything special to talk to us, then raise your hand. There's a icon there and you can tap that, and then we will know that you have a question with you. With this, I want to also introduce today's speaker. And why I said today is a special day for all of us is because Mike Rohde himself is with us. And he is right now from Massachusetts. So it's an early morning for him. And he is known for discovering the name Sketchnotes. He gave us the name Sketchnotes. So he pioneered it. And a lot of us might have read his book, the Sketchnote Handbook. So he is himself with us. And today we'll be learning directly from him. I don't want to waste even a single minute not to have him with us. So I'll directly hand over the session to him so that we have more and more learning time with him. So Mike, if you can open your camera so that we can see you, and I give the audience to you now. Welcome.
Hey guys, I'm just waiting for the handover.
Okay, let me see. So I'll close my screen share.
There you go.
And yes. And I'm also making you the spotlight.
Okay.
Open, if you can open your camera, Mike.
It's the host has stopped it.
Host has stopped it. Okay.
It's like
So,
maybe I just need approvals.
1 second. Ask to start a video. See if you got a notification.
Yep, I did.
Yes. And now I am making you as spotlight video. So now we see you. Yes, here you are.
Hey, hooray. Hello, everyone. I'm actually in Milwaukee, so it's actually 1 hour earlier than Massachusetts. So it's an early morning. I had my coffee. Sunday is the day of rest, so I guess this is our opportunity to rest after 6 hard days at boot camp and have some fun. But I think everyone was having fun the whole time. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm going to share my screen in a moment. We're going to walk through the this learning made easy with Sketchnotes on my iPad, so I can share some samples. I could do some drawing. So this has been designed for a wide variety of people. Whenever I present, I always make the assumption that there's going to be at least one person here who feels uncomfortable drawing, that it's not their, they don't feel like they're experts at it. And so in order to do this, I always set the ground rules by sharing how we do that. So that's going to be a core part of this. Around 8 o'clock when we finish with the drawing, we're going to have a special guest. So you'll see who that is in a little bit. And then we'll talk a lot about how you can use sketchnoting to help you educate yourself in learning, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get started by sharing my screen if that's possible. It looks like that might need to be turned on, Piyush, as well. I think, let me see if I've got that. I may actually have it.
So you're sharing your screen. You are right now on iPad, Mike?
Yeah, it's plugged into the Mac, and then I'm going to share through the Mac.
Okay.
So I will share a window that I have here on the Mac.
Mm-hmm.
Will that work? Okay. So what I may need to do is dial back in a moment. It looks like my Mac is being very stingy and making me dial in. So chat for just a second. I'm going to be right back.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So by that time, I would want to ask you, the participants, I have a question. What we were thinking is that till now, we want to make this boot camp like a real event in which when you come to a real event, you also network with other people. So till now you have been networking as in you have been listening to me and my team and the speakers, of course, but you have not been able to talk among yourself, right? So that kind of connection has not happened. So what we thought was that we should plan something for the 10th day, the last day. We should do something about networking. So here I have a question to all of you, and I wanted a poll to see what is your response. Take some time, take 30 seconds to fill this poll for me. I have launched the poll. So we are planning a small 1 to 1.5 hours of drinks and networking session at the end of the boot camp after 10 days. How would you like to have it? Good. We are seeing the responses now.
Yeah.
Mike, I have, you're there, Mike, again?
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, great. They are just filling a small poll, a question. And
so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yes.
There we go. In a moment, you should see my screen. Tell me if you see that.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Excellent.
Okay. Good. I think we will wait for 20 seconds and then we will end the polling.
And we can do it at the end too, right?
Yeah, we just started because there was a gap. So I think
Yeah.
most of them have filled. I'm taking a screenshot and then over to you, Mike.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like getting people together. I think it's a great opportunity. There's so
Yeah.
many like-minded people. It just makes sense. So welcome everyone to Learning Made Easy. As Piyush said, if you weren't here in the beginning, we're recording all of this session. The session will be available to you to download if you're a purchaser of the program, along with all the other ones. So that's the kind of cool part is you get everything that's going to be done. So that's pretty cool. So let's get started. So for me, notes were a burden. I don't know if for many of you, notes have been a burden for you, but they were for me back around 2006. I had to make a decision because notes weren't working for me anymore. I was struggling with taking too many notes, if you can believe it, and the feeling that I had to capture everything. I felt like a court reporter in a courtroom, that nothing could be left behind, and I had to make sure that I captured everything. And that put me in a place of stress because not only was I very good at taking notes, I also hated taking them because it felt like a job. It felt like a burden, right? So I made a choice that I needed to come up with another way. So I made this decision to shift what I was doing. What I had been doing is I would go to meetings with a 9x12 notebook, hardcover, with ruled pages, and I used a pencil. And the reason I used a pencil was so that I could make changes or erase mistakes. And I would write everything down. So I said, well, what would be the most opposite thing to this large book and a pencil? And I thought, well, what if I did a small pocket notebook and a pen? And that was the experiment that I ran. I went to a conference not far from my home in Chicago, a design conference. And I took this pen and a notebook, a moleskin pocket notebook, to this event to see what would happen. I really didn't know what would happen. A funny thing happened. Because I used a small notebook, I didn't have the room to write everything that I normally did. So that part of the problem was solved there. I didn't feel compelled to write everything down. And then the other thing that happened was, because I was using a pen instead of a pencil, I had to be a little bit more thoughtful about what it was that I was going to put on the page, right? So if I was thoughtful about what I was putting on the page, and I had a small notebook and had limited space, it put me in a place where I was focused on the big ideas. I was really thinking about what was being said, making decisions about what to put on the page, and then moving forward from there and capturing it. And for me, it felt like I had all this free time because I wasn't writing furiously all the time, right? I felt like I had space. I had the ability to do other things, to think about what was being said and make decisions. And then that gave me the freedom to do lettering and drawing and all these other things. And it felt to me like a revelation. And I ended up calling this Sketchnotes. It just seemed like the right kind of name for this thing that I was doing. A sample of what that looked like back in those days. This is an early Sketchnote from South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. What I discovered was not only was it fascinating to document the sessions I was attending and learning from, but I was also starting to document the things in between the sessions. And it made it pretty interesting because pretty much everything was fair game with sketchnoting. It was really this way of using visuals and writing to capture what I was experiencing. So that led to this book, the Sketchnote Handbook, which Piyush had mentioned earlier in the session. It's done really well, continues to sell, and it made the opportunity to write a second book called the Sketchnote Workbook. And that, in the Sketchnote Workbook, I went deeper into applications, different ways that you could apply sketchnoting in the work that you're doing. That also led to doing workshops. So giving workshops, lately, a lot of them in school districts, teaching teachers how to sketchnote themselves and then teach it to their students, which is very exciting work. So when Piyush actually reached out about this session, it felt like a natural fit since I'd been teaching so many teachers this concept and running them through these ideas for quite a while. So that's been a lot of fun. You may ask, what are sketchnotes? So that's a fair question. I call sketchnotes Notes Plus. So it's not like you stop writing like you are. You may write a little bit less because you're making a balance between writing and drawing. You're adding lettering to the writing that you're doing. And by that, I mean bolder, larger lettering. So you're using lettering to give hierarchy to your writing. So instead of all the same text, all at the same size, you're making larger ones, medium ones, smaller ones. You can use them for emphasis. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility. Then the next level is drawing. So now you're bringing in your visual thinking skills, however limited or expansive they are, and adding that to the writing. So it makes for this really interesting combination of things that you're doing at the same time, or at different times. And that ultimately leads to that focus on big ideas. If you'll remember back, it's a little bit like the cascade that happened when I had a small notebook and a gel pen. Having those two elements led to the third thing, which was this focus on big ideas, doing analysis and making decisions about what would be on the page as things went along, right? Instead of feeling compelled to write everything down. And I mean, the problem with writing everything down is I never wanted to look at my old notes. I didn't crack my books open to look at them. So half of the reason I made them was not being used, right? So now with this kind of sketch note, it's real easy for me to go back to my work, scan over it, and draw on the things I've learned from that session, whatever it may be. So here's my argument: is I think sketch notes are a lot more like the dented, muddy, reliable pickup truck. You would take it camping. You would take it for groceries. You would take it to haul lumber to your friend's house. You could take it to the opera if you wished, right? And park it and walk into the opera in your fancy suit. I think that fancy art or fine art is wonderful, and I also like Formula One. But it has a very specific purpose. If you look at those Formula One cars, they probably would have trouble on the streets, right? They would be running over bumps and potentially damaging wings. And so, their focus was on racing on a track against other like cars. So in that way, I think art sort of has these boundaries around it. And I think it has baggage with it for regular people. When you see fancy art, you think, I could never draw like that. I could never produce that art. Well, the reality is those artists may have spent a lifetime before they even arrived at the thing that you're looking at. So it's wrong to judge yourself on the gauge of fancy art when you're doing sketchnoting. Sketchnoting are much more like a practical tool, something you use to get from point A to point B and to get things done. So that's a good way a mental picture to think about when you think about sketchnoting in relationship to art. I just think sketchnotes are a useful tool for capturing your thinking. That's really what it's all about, right? Whether it's beautiful or not is secondary to whether the ideas are captured. And you'll see, if you've seen anything about me, like this travels with me, like right behind me, like a dog on a leash. Ideas, not art is my message. And it may sound provocative at first. In other words, that art is devalued. I don't think that at all. I think art is wonderful, but what we're talking about with sketchnotes are ideas. And the problem is again, art has some baggage to it. If you feel like you must draw like an artist, it's going to put you off from doing anything. But if you focus on ideas, then there's not this burden or this limitation in your ability to capture ideas. So how can you apply these sketch notes? Well, I thought it would be only fair for some who have not seen what sketch notes are. Maybe they saw this session and wondered what they were. They've heard the name before. Maybe they've seen other samples. I wanted to show you some samples and quickly go through a variety of samples. You can see what they might look like. So first of all, sketchnoting talks, sort of like the grandfather of where this all came from, is something that lots of people do. They go to sessions and they capture those talks. This is a sample of every Sunday I go to church, and I look at it as an opportunity to practice every week. It's really good practice for me. In this case, this was a sermon that I did where I limited myself. Again, often I'll limit myself to 2 colors, black and green. And during the session, which is about 40 minutes, I try to capture all of the sketchnote if possible. It's very common that afterwards I might spend 10 or 15 minutes checking for typos or adding little details that I missed. But really, I'm trying to focus myself in that moment and capture these thoughts and ideas on the page. So that's a sample of what sketchnotes from a talk would look like. And this can be anything. It doesn't have to be a sermon. It can be, a talk at your company. It could be a meeting. So this is one application. So sketchnoting meetings, as I mentioned before, I was on agile teams when I worked in a financial services company and worked very closely with those agile teams. And one of the things that we did were sprint reviews. And I had this idea in my head that why couldn't I capture what was being presented in the sprint review? And so I did. So I sat and I worked through whatever the teams were presenting, and I sketchnoted it, and they found it really valuable because on a single page, you could see all the key information. What did we deliver? What was our velocity? What's coming up next, right? So it was a really fun way to capture information that was really consumable in a really quick way. So TV and film, you can even stretch it a little bit further. This is a sample of a sketchnote I did where I challenged myself to sketchnote the ads in a Super Bowl in between the game. And so I had this happen to be one where it was someone who claimed that they'd gone to lunch with Chuck Norris, and then did a flashback. And you see that these two guys talking and throwing a salt shaker at Chuck Norris, and he kicks it back and hits the guy in the face. And you realize he's in the clinic at United Healthcare getting this injury fixed. But he now has a story that he had lunch with Chuck Norris. So it's taking this linear format, you know, a commercial, and turning it into a visual, a two-dimensional visual. So that was a fun challenge to do. So that can be done as well. You can also sketchnote idea maps. After getting the iPad Pro years ago, the 9.7, I had issues with the original pencil. It was kind of weird the way you charged it. There were some things that bothered me, and I thought maybe I should redesign it just for fun. So I started, after using it for a while, I thought of all the things that I wish that the iPad Pro's pencil would have. So here you see I've got, you know, what if the lightning cable was inside the barrel instead of having to plug it into the device? What if the cap could screw on? All these other questions, all these other thoughts that I had. And so I just sat down for, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes and scribbled out these thoughts, just getting the thoughts out of my head. This can be really valuable if you have ideas, to capture them and use both the drawing and the writing to capture your thinking. You can sketchnote processes. This is an interesting one. This is my friend Louise, and she has this wonderful Greek salad that she's brings to parties quite a bit. And so I had her give me the traditional recipe, and then I made it, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if I converted this to a sketchnote? I think my friend Mauro Toselli called these sketchapies, which makes sense, right? It's a sketched recipe.
Sketchapiece.
Yes, sketchapies. So I decided, well, what if I showed this in a different way? So you can see these are all the elements. This is the same thing that would be in the written text, but I'm actually drawing the elements. You can even see, you know, that the chickpeas are whole, that the avocados are cubed, you know, that there's cilantro, feta cheese is broken up, squeezed lime, and salt and pepper. It's really simple, right? And then you mix it all together. So it's a pretty simple recipe. But there's all kinds of little tips that I could fold in here. Things like using the avocado pits to keep it from browning, and chilling it in the refrigerator, right? So all these little things I can put in there. So this is just another way that sketchnotes can be used to capture what you're learning. Sketchnoting experiences. I'm a sports fan, and one of the things that I like to do is sketchnoting games. So you saw before that I was sketchnoting the ads in between the Super Bowl. Well, in this case, I decided to sketchnote the Super Bowl itself. And this was a game years ago between the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles. What I typically do is I'll do the title that you see up on top, and then I'll just let the flow of the game happen. And as really interesting things occur, I try to capture them. You can even see that I've got a typo for one of the first elements. I thought it was Ashlon, it's really Alshon. So I had to correct myself. And then as things occur, I just fit them in the space and work through the page until I have a full page, which represents the entire 3-hour game. So it's a really fun way for me to further engage with the game. It keeps me connected to the game, and I'm paying attention in a different way than if I were passively just observing the game. And this can be applied to any game. I have friends who do football games and in Europe, and baseball games, like cricket could be done this way. So there's lots of opportunities to use this as a way to document your experiences. Another kind of experience you can have, travel. So this is a sample of a visit that I made in New York City. I was on the Hudson River. You can see I'm looking at Hoboken, New York, or New Jersey on the other side. And I had a little slice of New York style pizza. So it was just my impressions, you know, little sketchy impressions, a sketch note of being in the city as a way to remember that. And it's amazing even when I look at this now, I can remember that moment with my wife standing on this beautiful summer day on the Hudson River. So lots of memories come back, even from this very rough black and white sketch. So again, ideas not art comes true again, because, you know, the ideas are really what it's about. And even these basic sketches can really spring forth these thoughts and feelings that you have deep inside yourself, deep in your mind. I think that there's studies being done that this combination of writing and drawing together, not only does it access more of your brain, but I think because it's spreading these tidbits all over your memory, it's a lot easier to access them. So let's talk about sketchnote experiences of food. So I have a taco shop that's not far from where I work downtown, where I haven't worked for a little while, but they serve their tacos out of an Airstream trailer, which is the shiny silver trailer popular in the United States. And they serve wonderful tacos. So one day I had my notebook and my brush pen and I noted my lunch, and then went back to the office and added a little bit of color. They have delicious guacamole and tacos. And so it was a really simple sketch note to sort of capture this moment for myself. So you can do this as well, as in little or as much detail as you like. So this is the part where we're going to teach you how to draw if you feel like you can't draw. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be at least someone out there who feels this way, that they would like to learn how to draw better or to feel competent. And we're happy you're here. I'm excited when I get a chance to teach people who feel this way. And so this is the time where if you have got your pens and pencils or your iPads and pencils or whatever it is that you'd like to draw with, this would be the time to get that paper and pen out and follow along with me. So let's go ahead and get started. One problem that I had when I wrote the book, Sketchnote Handbook, was I realized that there were many people that felt that they couldn't draw, right? That they had challenges around that drawing ability. And the problem is you don't sell many books if you can't convince people to draw. So I had to come up with a way to communicate drawing in a simple way that anyone could approach it. The interesting thing that I discovered was, as I watched myself drawing, I realized that I was really using very few shapes to put things together. It was almost like working with Legos, which was really fascinating. And so I started documenting this idea of 5 elements of drawing. Other visual thinkers have more extensive libraries. I'm going to show you these 5 elements. I believe these are the 5 elements are the square, circle, a triangle, a line, and a dot. So if you look at other visual thinkers in the field, they often have more than this. I just made the decision that 5 was very rememberable. And it sort of represented these basic shapes that you think of even as a kid, right? That you can use to build from it. And my friend Eva Lotta Lamb suggests that all these could really be condensed down to number 5, the dot, right? Because all these are collections of dots that form these shapes. So ultimately, it's really about one thing. But I think it's helpful to have 5 shapes to remember when you're drawing. It's a lot easier to approach things that way. So I think the thing we'll do now is we'll start doing some drawing and you can see what I mean. So I've got some words here and they help me to guide you and show you different things that we can draw. So the first one we're going to draw is the house. So let's start with a square like so. And then right on top of the square, I want you to draw a triangle like this. You can just connect these. So even if we stop right here, this very basic square with a triangle on top, for most people, I think even most people in the world would probably relate this to being a house, right? You wouldn't need to go further, especially since, you know, the word house is down below right here, right? So you could stop right here if you like. However, the beauty of Sketchnotes and this using the 5 elements is it's a lot like using Legos. Why couldn't you just keep adding Legos? So let's add a rectangle for a door, and then a line across for creating a window, a little dot there, and now you have a doorknob. In the attic upstairs, up on top, put another square. Now you've got a window in the attic. And then finally, I like using a rectangle, which is a form of a square, on the roof. And now you can use your line, and let's make it squiggly. And now you've got smoke coming from the chimney. So you can see, you could probably keep going in much more detail, you know, putting siding on there and all kinds of bushes, and you can do all kinds of things if you have the time. But what it shows is that you can get away with something simple and either in the moment or later add detail. That's the beauty of this approach. So now let's go to book. So if I were to draw a book in a simple way, this is how I would do it. I would start with a rectangle, so that's a square stretched out, and then I would do a line right down the middle. You could, again, stop right here. This would probably be enough to communicate that idea. However, why not add some depth? So let's do another parallel line below the book and then connect it to the book with 3 lines. Now what you've done is you've created the illusion of volume in the book. So you're suggesting that there are pages in the book. We people are amazing at pattern recognition. We see things where they don't exist. When we look at clouds, we see pigs and horses and all kinds of things, right? Because we're trained to find patterns in things. And so you can use that to your advantage by suggesting things like depth to the book. Now let's add some more detail. Let's just do lines to represent the text in the book on the left page. Let's say it's an illustrated book, and on the right we've got a photo. So let's use a square here. Maybe it's a photo of a mountain, so we'll use a triangle. And then a couple of lines to finish that. So really we've used 3 of the 5 elements just in this simple book. All right, so now we're gonna go to coffee. Now the challenge is when you think of a coffee cup, you think of something circular, right? I believe if you feel uncomfortable with drawing circles and perspective and all those scary things that you may have remembered from college or even elementary school, as long as you can, why not stay in 2 dimensions? So if you take a coffee cup and you look at it on a side view, and I'm imagining these coffee cups you see in a cafeteria, right? It's a sort of a rectangle. Maybe it would have another rectangle below. This is sort of that stacking, so they can stack them up and run them through the dishwasher. And then you've got a curve for the handle. So here we go with a really basic coffee cup. You don't have to worry about circles unless you wish to. And then the final thing you can do is use the lines and do some vapor coming off. Now you've got your morning coffee. And if you're a tea drinker, you just change the word and write tea. So again, these things are always working together to help each other out. So this is the next one is a dog, and our little dog Rufus just passed away. Unfortunately, he's in doggy heaven playing, but we have a symbol for Rufus that I like to draw, and it's just a series of lines and triangles, and then 2 little dots for his eyes and his little nose. So it's a really simple way to draw a dog. When I show this to my kids, they immediately know that's Rufus, and it's representational for me for a dog. There's probably other ways to draw dogs. This is a really simple way that I do it. Again, just whenever you think of an object, think of how simply you can draw it. How can I get away with the simplest things? And then finally, let's look at a burger. Again, I'm going to go to 2-dimensional drawing, and I'm going to draw it from a side view. So first we'll start with the bun on the bottom. Here's your meat patty or non-meat patty if you're a vegetarian. For some reason, I like to draw the McDonald's Big Mac. I don't know if all of you have seen this. It's got a piece of bread in between the second patty. It's quite decadent. Then it's got some other things, and usually you can see the lettuce below, and then here's our bun on the top. And the bun usually has sesame seeds, so we can use our dots to fill that in. And there you have a burger. Again, you don't have to put yourself in the difficult spot of doing perspective if you don't want to. So let's go ahead and move on to the visual library. So what's interesting is as you start working and using this way of drawing, this simple way of drawing, you end up creating a visual library. And a visual library is just the icons and the drawings that you repeatedly do. So you can build your own visual library for the kind of terms and concepts that you use often. So you have a ready library at hand. You don't have to think much about it. It just comes to mind, or you can put it in the back of your notebook and carry it with you. So let's start with a fish. You can just take 2 curved lines like so and cross them. Finish by closing the tail off. Now you can add some personality. So you can give the fish an eye. Maybe he's a happy fish. He's got a little smile there. Some fins. Let's say he's, he's in the water. You can draw the water line, right? Maybe he's just eaten an insect on the surface, so he's got some bubbles coming up. So again, in a couple of lines, you can draw really detailed things if you wish. But you really don't need lots of detail, so you can see how simply we were able to create that fish. I'm going to show you the way that I like to draw a bird. So I start with an oval right here in the middle above the word. And then I draw just, bird feet, simple bird feet like so. I do a line for the neck and then a circle for the head. Triangle for the beak. There you've got your dot for the eye. Just a curve for the wing and a triangle for the tail. So it's a really simple way to draw a bird. I guess technically this is probably a young chicken, I suppose, but it could represent other birds as well. It's enough to communicate that idea. So remember, we're focusing on communicating simple ideas. You don't have to feel that it has to be exact as long as it communicates the concept. That's what we're going for. Camera. So let's do this. I would start with a rectangle like this. In the middle, just draw a circle like so. And if we do, this is an old school 35mm camera. I think that's where the mirror usually sits in a 35mm camera. So you could probably stop there and that would be enough. However, again, why couldn't we add more detail? So I'm going to show you a little trick here. So let's start with, on the inside, draw a parallel circle on the inside, and then draw one more, a very small one at the very top, and then fill in the inside of the circle. And what you're doing, remember we talked about pattern recognition. When we see this, we see a lens with a reflection of light on the lens, because typically those lenses are really polished and shiny, and it gives the suggestion of false depth, right? There's a little line, a little shine in the lens. And then the last thing I'll do is let's draw lines over here and fill that in. So that's that leatherette material that all those 35mm cameras have on them. And then maybe you would have two rectangles for the controls up on top. And now you've got a basic camera. Pizza. So you might be tempted when you draw a slice of pizza, and I'm just going to draw the slice, to do just a triangle. I would suggest that you should put a little curve on this, because remember, you're coming out of a circle and there's more pizza than just your slice. And then you can follow with a parallel line to that curve, and now you have a pizza crust. And now, let's say this is a pepperoni pizza. I like having the pepperonis, I fill them in right away. I like them sort of going off the slice a little bit. And again, what that reinforces is this idea that it's part of a larger whole. So these are little tiny tricks you can do to reinforce the things that you're drawing. Suggestions by the way you place things. Little simple things can often go a long way. And then finally, let's do a submarine. So I would just draw sort of a stretched out oval, like so. On the top of a submarine, you've got a rectangle. They call it the conning tower. And then that's where the periscope comes out on top, right? So they can look around. Typically, if they're going to shoot a torpedo, I believe they're at the water line. They can see what they're shooting at. Let's give it propellers. So put a little square at the back and then two ovals sort of tipped. And now you've got a propeller. We can use a line to suggest that it's maybe slowing down. You can put a little line here for the torpedo tube, and then you can draw a little torpedo shooting at the slice of pizza. There we go. We're about to have a pizza incident happening. So again, if you think about things really simply, that's the fun of this, is how simply can I get away with drawing something with just these 5 shapes? And that's the fun challenge that you can take as you do this. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about icons. I find these really helpful for when I am attending meetings, when I'm thinking about anything. These are common icons. In a sense, these are part of my visual library. So let's start with the first one, a clock. So for me, the clock is a powerful thing. As a designer, I'm always running on deadlines. I've got deadlines to deliver things. So you can see I've just listed an icon that's set for, say, 4 o'clock. You wouldn't even have to really write that, but you could do that. So you could say due at 4 p.m., which is usually the case for me. But that simple circle with the position of the hands is a really easy way when you're taking notes to identify, hey, there's a deadline on this note that I'm taking. Be aware, put something on your calendar, set an alarm, whatever you need to do. Ultimately, what I'm doing with these icons is I'm building sort of identifiers on the margins at least, or maybe within the text, that alerts me to an action that I need to take. So ultimately, these are action-oriented icons. One that's a little less action-oriented is the hierarchy that I use for doing bullets. So if I do emphasize things, I might start with a star for level 1, And then level 2, I would do the asterisk. So this allows this, what I find is if I allow myself to fall into the, like structuring my notes, like 0.13Z or something like that, like I start to lose myself in the text. And by keeping a really flat hierarchy, it helps me focus on the content. So this is a way that I can indicate more important and less important things. Something else that I do in my notes is I use checkboxes. So you can put a checkbox right in there and write a task. A trick that I learned from my friend Bill Westerman is you can actually put a little dot right in the center of your checkbox to indicate that you're in progress. And what's kind of cool about that is if you've got an in progress checkbox like this, you can check it off. Or you can exit out. You decided you didn't want to do that task. And then finally, if I'm in progress and I decide I'm going to delegate it, you can draw an arrow. Let's delegate this to Ed. So now you can delegate that. And in your notes, you can be doing this and saying, I'm delegating this to Ed. This is in progress. This is done. And so you're sort of, it puts you in the mindset of action again, right? Like what are the tasks that are related to these notes that I'm thinking, if that's relative to the notes you're taking. Something that I use pretty often is actually the light bulb. I do a really simple light bulb like this, Edison style bulb. And what this does, a lot of times when I'm in meetings, I may be thinking about other things and I don't want to lose those things, right? So I want to capture them, and I use this light bulb as an indicator. Come back and look at this and turn it, put it into your notes or whatever the action is for me to deal with this idea. But it helps me to put a stake in the ground about there's an idea I need to deal with at some future point. And then finally, the last one that I'll use is the alert. And that could be for scope creep, that could be the deadline's close, that could be John broke his leg and is going to be out for 2 weeks or whatever that is. And it helps me again, like this is an issue I have to deal with. And then I can write notes about what I want to do to deal with that issue. All right, so we're going to do some lettering now, some really simple lettering. I'm going to clear this out for you guys. I was practicing this morning with my coffee here. So let's do, I'm going to do Piesh, I'm going to do your last name, Modi. So what I'm going to have you do is just write in block letters, M-O-D-I, like so. This I call the two-line method, and the reason I call the two-line method is because you're simply using parallel lines to thicken your words quickly. So now what I want to have you do is draw parallel lines next to the ones you've drawn, all the way through the letter forms. So we'll do the O, the D, and then the I. All right, so we've got that. Now what I'm going to have you do is cap the ends wherever there's openings. So the I is the only one with openings. So now what you've done is you've made a structure or a framework for a letter form. The beautiful thing about this is you can, as you're going through your notes, if you've got big enough lettering, you can actually apply this to letters that are months or years old. If you decide that word is really important, I want to emphasize it, you simply go back and use the two-line method and add another line to it. It's a really easy way to do bold lettering, either now in the moment or in the future. And it's, I'm gonna do a little sample. Like if you have to try and draw letters like this takes lots of concentration and practice. And even then it can be challenging, right? So rather than do that, why not just help yourself out and build a framework? So now what I would do is go in and fill this in. So what you end up with is a nice bold letter. The other cool thing is when you get done with this, nobody knows that you've done a framework. No one knows that you've done a template. They just see the final result, right? You can know the secret and they don't need to know. So I'm going to show you one other lettering technique, and that is the three-line method. Now the three-line method consumes space. It's designed to make really bold lettering in the same way as the two-line, and you start it in the same way as the two-line. So you do a parallel line, like so. But what you do now is you add another line on the other side. So let's add one on the top and on the insides. And you can see that this is going to be a much bolder letter than the ones above, simply because you're consuming more space. So you have to be aware of this. If you're going to use this for a headline, you need to account for space. And maybe you would do this where you have more time. I don't know, this maybe not applicable in the moment unless you account for the space, but for headlines, it's really great. Like the other 2-line method, we cap it off. And then because we're going to share this deck, I'm going to copy this and then paste another one because I want you guys to see what the original looked like and what the filled one looks like. So now let's take the second one, I'll fill it in. And now you've got a really bold H. And this can be done for any letter form. Again, you can see how it consumes space. I'm going to come in here and add a little depth to this side to balance the two out. But basically it consumes a lot of space, so you have to account for that. So these are two really quick ways just to get started doing bold lettering for emphasis. So now we're going to draw people. So there's 2 people that I teach people to draw who are beginning. One is my friend Dave Gray. Many of you may know who Dave Gray is. Awesome guy. And he taught me this way of doing people. And what it is he starts with a rectangle for the body. So if you think of a typical stick figure, they're sort of like this, right? Pretty quick, and there's nothing wrong with that. If that's your thing, then that's fine. The beauty of this is if you start with a rectangle, you've got this whole body to decorate. You can put a shirt and tie, you can turn it into a dress. There's all kinds of things you can do with that shape that you can't as easily do with a stick person. And then from the lower corners, draw the feet. Dave always says that you can tell the most about a body simply by the body and the feet. So you would start with that. And then from the top corners, you can draw arms and then do like Lego hands, right? Just really simple curves like so. And then a line and a head. And then of course, you can make it a happy person. I like doing a nose like this, sort of like a triangle. And then you can add some detail. What's kind of cool is it's not too hard as you practice to make these type of people have action. So let's do a slightly tilted rectangle, and we're going to do somebody running. So let's do their feet. And now do their arms, right? So they're going to do sort of a running shape, and then the head. Another way you can do a nose that Dave taught me is you can just do a line. What that actually tells you is a lot about the direction the person is looking. So if that line is forward, the person's looking forward. What's kind of cool is you could turn it this way and now they're looking backwards, and you did nothing except change the direction of the nose, which is kind of cool. So that's a Dave Gray person. Sometimes I'll draw like a line here to suggest like a shadow. Now the second person that I'm going to teach you to draw is the star person. This is really common in graphic recording and facilitation. So if you think about, remember that star that we showed you in the icons, right? Like so. It's a little bit like this part is the head and the rest is the body, and you're stretching it into place. So if you watch me do this, you'll see what I mean. So you start with the head on this one, and then you draw the body by stretching those points of the star down and out. Now you can do the same kind of things. You can decorate the person, right? You can make tall, thin people. You just stretch out the star a little more. There's limits to the shape. The thing I like about this is once you get the hang of it, it's really fast. Both of these are really fast. That's why I like both of them. My friend Michael Clayton taught me this star person. See how long it takes for you to figure out what this is. Same stretching. It's sumo wrestler star person. Definitely have a shadow. So those are 2 really quick ways you can draw people that can help you capture movement and shape and direction. As you practice these, they can be really helpful. My friend Eva Lotta actually has a course right now where she's teaching how to draw people. She has a little bit more detailed way that she approaches it, but it's not very far away from this. So that might be interesting if you're really drawing lots of people in your work. All right, so now we're going to talk about Sketchnote idea maps. We've done some drawing And now we're going to take a few minutes to challenge you to do some drawing using these techniques. The whole point of us learning these techniques is to use them. So I always believe in teaching concepts and then application. I think that's a really great way to learn things. And so we're going to do the same thing here. Sketchnote idea maps, if you remember that Apple Pencil concept that I showed you earlier, was just a way to take these ideas that were in my head maybe for like 2 months as I was using the pencil, and finally it reached a point where I just need to draw this. And it helped me think through the problem that I was thinking about and get it on the page and think through it and find out what was going on. A lot of times you can make connections between things that you couldn't just by holding things in your head by putting it on the page. So Sketchnote idea maps are really helpful for that. So the two benefits, it gives you a good overview, but then you can also, explore visually what's working, the connections, all those things. So we're going to do what I call is the treehouse exercise. I've run this hundreds of times all over the world. It's a really fun activity. And here are the rules. So we're going to do about 10 minutes of work. I'm going to break it into 2 5-minute chunks for you. The reason I break it into 2 chunks is halfway through, you may decide you want to go in a different direction. And if I simply give you 10 minutes, you might just keep working on that first concept and feel like you had no way out. So when we run this, most people really fall in love with their treehouse and they fill it in. But there are a few that I wish I could have just pivoted and done something a little different. This allows those few people that opportunity to pivot and try something else. The rules are we want to keep it rough. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not giving prizes for beauty. Remember, ideas, not art. If you're just learning how to draw since you were maybe in 4th or 5th grade or junior high school, this is a good opportunity to keep it simple and focus. Your house is going to go in the tree here. So something I learned after running this a few times was a lot of people would spend the whole time drawing the tree and never arrive at a house. So the next suggestion or rule that I say is more tree house, less tree. So if you want to simply draw a house, we can even make the assumption that it's in a tree. But as you'll see by the samples I'll show in a second, you can simply draw lines to suggest the tree, and it's quite effective. So here's some samples from other sessions that I've run. This person had some experience as an architect or had done like a fan of architecture. So you can see they've got a treehouse village. So the things I want you to notice about this is they've got a title up on top. They've got the drawings sort of in the middle, and then they have the words on the edges, either underneath or to the left. So that's one way you can approach it. Notice the trees are simple lines. They're not detailed. They don't have to worry about grain or anything like that. They just represent the tree. And there's a lot of focus on the houses, like how do they fit together? How do they attach to the tree? Where are the ladders? And you'll see this person chose to do a floor plan and elevation just because they were really nerdy, apparently. But it basically communicates their thinking. This is one way to do it. Here's another way. This maybe is more of the way you would approach it. It's almost like a side view slice of a treehouse. So you can draw the shape and then actually write right on the sketch note the things that you're identifying: the window, the grow box, the barn door. Right, they're writing right on top of the drawing. Again, the tree is just really just lines to represent trees. So not focusing any time on the tree at all. And the last one I'll show you, I almost think of this as like a Dr. Seuss treehouse, right? The tree is in the middle, and there you can sort of see it, and the house is totally wrapped around the tree. The thing I want you to notice about this is the drawing is in the middle of the page, and then there's notes on the edges with arrows pointing to the elements, right? So that's another way. So there's all these different ways you can construct it. There's not really rules about that. If you want to write directly on it, if you want to separate it, if you want to use arrows and text, all those are perfectly fine. But I do want you, when we do this exercise, to do both drawing and writing. And if you want to try out some of these techniques, if you want to use your 2-line lettering, if you want to draw people, if you want to build things with shapes, this is your opportunity to stretch your legs and try these concepts out. So we're going to do 10 minutes. I'm going to time you. And I've got a special guest, which only a few people on the leadership team know about, and it's my daughter, Linnea. She's 10, and she's going to come and she's going to do some drawing for you guys. So Linnea, why don't you come on over? I'm going to get a page ready for you. So I've given her a blank page in the deck. I'm going to let her sit down, and I'm going to time you. So everybody follow along and do your own treehouse. You may want to get another sheet of paper So if you're taking notes about how to draw, you might want to separate that from the treehouse drawing.
Hi, Ania.
Hello.
Mike,
So,
one common question people are asking is which app
yes.
you are using?
I am using, I'm trying to think of what the name is now. It is, I always forget. Note Shelf.
Note Shelf, okay.
Note Shelf. I find, so a little side note, I use Paper by 53 a lot. I still use it. Back in the day, you could do presentations like this with it, but they changed their focus and took that feature away. So I had to find a new tool. So I actually found that Note Shelf really worked well for importing images. And it not only was a pretty decent drawing tool, but it actually works really well as a presentation tool. And if I was plugged into a screen, it actually has a thing called whiteboard mode where all this, you know, we see the Chrome, all the drawing tools, it hides that for you and you just see a plain screen. So that's kind of cool. All right, so Linnea, why don't you get started? We're gonna start right now. We're gonna do 5 minutes starting now. Which color you can put up there? Play a little bit of music for everyone while you're drawing. That's very depth, isn't it? I like that circle. Look around. Yeah, it's like a hobbit girl. What kind of fun things can you put on your treehouse?
I know.
What about a satellite dish? It's got flags, nice. Look at the other one. How do you think it would fit in a tree?
A happy haunted trail.
It's like a palm tree. What's the setting? Where do you think it would be at?
I don't know.
I think it would be by the ocean. We had some notes about what things are too. That's what I was doing. That's cool. All right, everyone, that's we're at 1 minute of our first 5 minutes. So you get a 1 minute warning, and then we're going to pause for just a few seconds. You can switch colors if you want to. This one right here will let you do highlights.
Mhm.
All right, everyone, that's 5 minutes. Can you believe how fast 5 minutes goes? It's crazy when you get into the focus of what you're doing, that 5 minutes can go so quickly. So this is a moment where if you wanted to shift direction and do a different treehouse, you can do that. If you want to continue on the treehouse you have and add more detail, that's certainly fine. Remember, we were trying to use all these elements that we were teaching to build, to draw people and those kind of elements. Make sure you're adding notes. So if someone were to pick up your treehouse, there would be some indication of like where the kitchen is or whatever it is you're trying to describe. So with that, I'm going to set another 5 minute timer. And at the end of that, we'll have a look at Linnea's work and talk a little bit about that. Maybe, Piyush, we can have someone share, we can pick somebody to share their treehouse and talk about it for a minute. So here we go, 5 minutes again.
Yeah, after this 5 minutes, we'll ask everyone to share their pages.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We'll bring it up on the grid. It's very relaxing watching someone else draw.
Actually.
Watch. I'm going to show you something else. You could change the size by clicking this. Look, the next one here. Here's the pencil. You can make it bigger or smaller.
I want it huge.
You want to color something in? You go.
By the way, Mike, if you want to know, we have 148 people learning from you right now.
Oh, great. We have about 2 minutes left in this session, everyone. It's amazing how time flies when you focus on drawing. Such a meditative practice. some things here. That's what you did. Flags. Right window. Shift to your dark colors. One minute warning, everyone. I like your heart-shaped window. Is that a window up there? That's pretty cool. All right, everyone, that's time. We've just spent 10 minutes drawing, which is awesome. You can have a look at Linnea's wonderful drawing. I love the colors on this. She's added some notes to it. So she's using both writing and drawing together. Really brilliant colors here.
This is lovely.
So what I'm going to have you do is take your work if it's if it's on paper and it's easy to present to your camera, and you can show it to Linnea and me, and let's see what you've worked on.
Mike, is
Wow,
it
look at that.
for you to quickly unshare your screen so we have more people and this
Yeah.
picture moment?
Sure thing.
And you will be able to see everyone's picture then.
Yeah, let me stop sharing. There we go.
Super. Oh wow, you can bring.
Oh, look at that. Yeah,
those
I like those colors. That I saw someone with pink.
Yeah.
Isn't this a fun project? Like even little kids can do this project, which is so great. Oh, Daniel, I love your detail, Daniel. Hey, we got some kids on here. All right. I love it. Look at all those wonderful tree houses. Wow. I think what we should do is, if you feel comfortable posting on social media somewhere, we should come up with a hashtag, Piyush, and we can share it related to our standard hashtag.
Shared with them the hashtag and everything.
Yeah, we could definitely use that.
Share on
And
or social media and say visuals at work, and we'll be able to.
Yeah, there we go. This is awesome. Thank you, everyone. This is really cool.
This was so much fun.
Can't wait to see. I keep scrolling. I think I won't ever stop. All right. Thank you, Linnea, for drawing with us. It was really fun to see her work. Let's switch back to sharing the screen so we can continue with the presentation. I'm going to switch with Linnea now. Right. We're going to jump into the next section now. So you guys are all, you now know the basics. That's the basics of sketchnoting. You know it, right? Hopefully it felt to you that it was not too complex, that it wasn't unachievable, that you can approach it. Seems like everyone's done treehouse work, which is really good. So now we're going to get into ways to apply it for learning. This is the most fun for me because I get to share some of the thoughts that I've had regarding this. So I think they're a great combination. Sketchnotes and learning work together. I think of it as like Reese's peanut butter cup, if you like those, you know, the peanut butter and the chocolate, or you know, a good cappuccino and a little chocolate together, just a really good combination. Berries and cream, same kind of thing. So if you know anything about me, you know that these are my symbols. You see them on my book covers, you see them on my sketchbook covers, you see them on t-shirts. I'm wearing it on a t-shirt here. And I wanted to talk for a minute about what they mean and why I use them. So, and I think this applies to learning. So this is the sketchnote. I think of this as the sketchnote process. Let me go to a thicker line. And there's a reason that these are in a certain order, because I believe the first thing you're doing is you're getting your inputs, right? This is what's coming in. You're hearing and you're seeing. That can be, you know, you're listening to the speaker, you're hearing what they're saying, you're seeing their body language, you're maybe seeing slides to give you ideas about what's going on. And then there's this step in the middle. This is the analysis here. You're going to analyze. This is where you process the information. You're making decisions about what to keep and what not to put on the page, what's important, what's not important. And then finally, after you go through this process, now you're drawing, now you're visualizing. Right? So it's really important. I think lots of people put an emphasis on this part and get hung up on perfect drawings. But I think actually this part over here, this input part, this is where it, and this are where it's at, these two. This focus on hearing, seeing, and thinking is what the drawing is really the output of what you're doing internally, right? That's showing what you're doing internally with an external drawing. So it's really important that you focus on those three areas. I would rather see someone who's really good at hearing and seeing and thinking and is not great at drawing than the other way around, because a lot of times you can have a beautifully illustrated piece, but it doesn't have any thought behind it. And that doesn't do, you know, it doesn't help the person who's doing the work, and it doesn't help anyone who might see that work afterwards. So that's how I think about the sketchnote process, why it appears in that order and how it applies to learning. So why would you bother sketchnoting to help you learn? Well, there's a couple things that as I've thought about this leading up to this session, things that seem to jump right out at me. So I think a really big thing is you become really intentional about your learning. If you make a commitment to doing sketchnoting and sketchnote the things that you're learning about, that's a commitment to being intentional, that you're gonna give it focus. You're gonna not be a passive listener, not just sit back and let information come in and hope that you make some sense of it, but that it's a proactive approach towards learning. I believe that there's improved retention, and we've got some research that's happening now that's verifying this, that the retention of ideas is much better. We talked a little bit about sort of your mind, you know, storing things in multiple places so it's easier to recall. So the recall and retention. Teachers who introduce this to students find that their students definitely have better retention and recall for testing. And they're more engaged. They're more engaged in the work that they're doing, right? It's easy to review your notes later. Remember in the beginning, I talked about I had these 9x12 books and all this writing in pencil that I never opened because it was too dense. It was like chopping through a forest. Like, why would I bother going in there? When your sketchnote is one page, like it's hard not to review it, and it's fun to look at. And then finally, you can share that work with others. That's a really key thing. Now, you don't have to. You can certainly keep the sketch notes that you are producing for yourself. I have friends who keep private journals where they sketch note ideas and they don't share with anyone. That's fine. But if you do choose to share with a colleague at work, let's say you're allowed to go to a session and your colleague can't make it and they don't have time to really review the whole session. Maybe it's a day-long session of things. Your sketch notes can be a way to quickly understand that information. You can also use it as a presentation device. So you could actually show your sketch notes on a screen and it will bring back those ideas and help you to present those concepts to someone else. So it can also be a teaching tool. I know I have a friend who's an attorney and he will do sketch notes of his pleadings and he'll lay it out in a certain structure. And the lawyers, when he comes in the room, start laughing at him because he has this one sheet of paper and it's a drawing until he beats them, because he's very organized and has a structure about what he's doing. And he's very, very clear-headed and focused, right? So there can be definite advantage to leveraging visualization in the work that you're doing. All right, so here's a little bit of a very nerdy science descriptive bit of research that I found, the powerful impact of drawing on memory. So the research is suggesting that it really does promote this integration of, your motor skills and pictorial information, and it produces a context-rich representation of ideas. So if you're just writing, it's going to use your verbal channel, but if you use visuals, you're expanding your capabilities. This is some research from back in 2018. And there's more of it that's coming out. I'm not citing a lot of it here, but the more the research is done, the more they're finding that drawing is really powerful. And no surprise. So I'm going to switch into focus on educational sources. And I'm listing 7. I know there's more than this for the sake of time and what we want to cover. I wanted to share these 7 and show samples of how they work and talk about them, the benefits, as a way to think about, if I'm going to approach learning with Sketchnotes, how would I do it, right? I always try to be really practical and share information that's practical. So this is the way I want to approach it. So we have live talks. We've talked a little bit about that. Recorded video, books, articles, podcasts, one-on-one chats, and then experiences. We've sort of touched on some of these in the samples earlier. We're going to go a little bit more detail with some different samples now. So first, live talks. Well, I was hired to do this live talk for the Visit Milwaukee organization. It's an organization that encourages people to visit our city. And this was the Milwaukee Marketing Summit. And so they had a variety of people up on a panel. And I was in the room, and I sat and I captured the things they talked about, the developments that are happening in our city at the time. So you can see that there's food trucks are starting to happen in the city, which is great. We talked about Bubbler Bikes, which is this rentable bike system that's in the city. Reforming, different areas, the different projects that are happening. So really you can see there's not lots of detailed text here, but it's more imagery to help you. So if you were in this session, because the idea for this was I would do the sketch notes, they would be shared with the attendees. They could then look at this image and remember the things that were talked about in a really quick way, right? You could scan over this in 5 minutes and be refreshed on that whole 1-hour session. So that's an advantage of doing meeting notes. I'll show you one more. Again, this is a sketch note from a sermon. This one I happened to do on the iPad, and it was a series. And this particular one, I don't know if you know the story of Jonah. Jonah's the guy who didn't want to go to Nineveh and was swallowed by a whale. So I was having a little bit of fun with some of the concepts. And for me, when I do sermons like this, it really helps me engage with the content in a different way than if I were passively sitting back and just listening to the stories. Because I have to make an intentional choice about what I put on the page. What does it mean? My interpretations are baked into this discussion. I can have a little fun, like, Jonah getting away from the whale and I'll never eat sushi again, or, just having a little bit of fun with it. So you can bring in levity and humor and make it your own, right? And then when you look back at it in a really simple way, within a few minutes, you can look at this concept and see it pretty clearly. So let's jump to recorded video, which is more common these days in the COVID world we're in. Even the live talks would probably be delivered on video like this. So the beauty of recorded video is that you can pause it, you can rewind it, and you have control over the content. So if you missed something, unlike with a live session, you can go back and check it out. So that can be, Masterclass or Skillshare, Udemy, YouTube. There's all kinds of video sources that you can use. Now, the sample that I'm showing you, the story behind this was I was invited to come to a screening of a movie by a company called Envision. It makes design tools that I use in my city. And so they screened this documentary about the disruptors in design, particularly in software design, which is their space. The challenge was I was in a theater and it was dark. And typically with an iPad, you would have the screen and you would do white. Well, that's a problem because I'm glowing around everybody around my seats, and that was a problem. So I thought, well, how could I solve this problem? What if I started with a black palette? So I actually filled the page with black, switched to bright colors, and then actually sketchnoted using the bright colors, and it wasn't interrupting anybody that way. And you can see that as I sat through the movie, this is, I don't know, an hour-and-a-half movie. There was a second page, but this is really compressed learning, right? I'm learning about what they're saying about the levels running from visual down to product. The design sprint was a concept they talked about. I had this drawing, of the little dinosaur, right? The concepts, it's really hard to make great products. So these things that are coming into my mind that are really interesting. Saving time is sexy now, right? Like all these concepts that they're sharing are sort of captured in these little elements, and then I can go back and think about them later and apply them to the work I do as a designer to remember these comments, these ideas that were presented in all different ways, either said or shown. And this provided a way to capture that information. Then I can go back to it again and again and draw meaning from it. So that's the beauty of a recorded session, is you can stop and go forward. In this case, it was presented live. I couldn't stop it, but it was recorded. So in the same way, you can do that with the work that you're doing. Books. So this is one of the oldest input tools, right? Books have been around. Books are really inexpensive if you think about the knowledge they contain, especially if you're a library card holder. They're free, right? You can get access. That's our governments are providing that for us. Books are really helpful because, like a recorded video, you can move back and forth. So there's this book I picked up, I think about 1.5 years ago, called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. Excellent book. The reason that I was interested in this book is part of the work that I do as a designer is design thinking facilitation of workshops. And I heard her on a podcast, actually, and found her concepts really interesting. So I bought her book and started to sketchnote the book concepts on my iPad as I was reading through the book. And what I would do is just simply work through ideas. You can see that these are, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that they're very text-based. There's not lots of drawing. Because for me at the moment, like getting the text down was really valuable. Like what she was saying was important, right? If you come to the second page, you can see in this one, I'm doing a little bit more drawing, right? I'm showing, the idea of a safe space, the magic group numbers that you talked about really was striking me. So I was capturing this idea of the kindness of exclusion she talks about, that, being particular about who you invite to, especially a small gathering, can really change the dynamic. So all these lessons that I was learning from her, I captured in these sketch notes. And now I can go through the sketch notes and draw the ideas. So I know some people talk about leaving notes in the books themselves. There's some problems with that. If you ever loan the book and it doesn't come back, which seems to happen a fair amount of time, you lose all your notes, right? If you put your notes in that book, then you've lost them. So the advantage of capturing notes in your own notebook is that they always stay with you, especially if you use it digitally like an iPad. You can save that in a couple places. You can share it with other people. So there's some advantages to doing that with books. Of course, it's a dedication to doing this as you're reading, because it's a little bit more work. But if it's something that you're going to use for reference and you want to learn lessons from, even if it's just, maybe it's one page about the book, like what are the 5 or 7 things that the book told you, right? You can capture those things. So articles, a lot of us as professionals, we have articles that we read, things that are important to our business, or just in general, if you want to try and understand concepts about the world around us, you can take articles and sketchnote those too. This is an activity that I run with people in my sketchnote workshops, where we read an article about the avocado, how it survived evolution, why it still exists, how they think that it spread, and some of the facts about it. And so I have the students read this 4-page article and then they sketchnote the concepts. So that's sort of the challenge that they take from this article. Some will sketchnote as they're reading, so they'll read and they'll make notes and they'll build their sketchnote. Some people will read it once or twice and then come back once they understand the concepts and lay out their sketchnote. Each way is fine. So you can see this person was having some fun with some of the notes and things in the concept. You see they boiled 4 pages down to 1 page and really got to the key concepts of the avocado. So this can be really helpful if you're in a business where you have to deal with lots of research and you have to think about it. It might help you make connections that you're not making if you're simply reading through it and highlighting. So podcasts, here's another resource that's really helpful. That allows you to capture information, understand information, and turn it into sketch notes. So this is my friend Liam Williams, Leodo_UK. He shared this sketch note of one of my Sketchnote podcast episodes. And for him, it was a way to listen to the session and capture the things that stood out to him. The beauty of a podcast is there's really no visual component. So you're free, if you're not washing the dishes or mowing the lawn or whatever else you might be doing, or driving to the office, if you dedicate time to actually sit with a pen and paper or your iPad while you're listening, there's nothing to distract you from capturing the concepts that you're learning. So it's a really effective way to get information that frees you to focus your visual skills on doing the sketchnoting. So this is a really useful, and there's so many great podcasts out there that you could listen to and apply and turn them into sketchnotes. One-on-one chats. So I've done this in a couple of different sessions as a designer who does research. This is a really important skill for me to have. So this is user-centered research that I was doing with a user who was, we were redesigning software, internal software for their company. And I went and I saw her on site, and it was a restaurant, and she had a terminal. And so I just started asking her questions, myself and my colleague. And as she was talking, I just started sketchnoting what she was saying, the things that she liked. You'll notice this red area sort of in the middle, drowning in reports, so many reports, right? And I could see the image that she was showing me, this long list of reports in this long scrolling list. And I did it in red because it felt like it was a problem. Like there's something about this that we can improve. So that really simple, hand reaching out like I'm drowning sort of reminds me this is really important. And then some other things she talked about, the menus weren't sticky or whatever other little details. So I'm actually visualizing these things as she's talking about them. In this case, I didn't really share it with her. Wasn't important for that context, but a lot of times if you're doing one-on-ones with someone, it's really nice to share the sketch notes you take because you are reflecting back to that person the things you're hearing. I've done this for people who are changing professions, thinking about changing professions and listening to what they were saying and then sharing those notes back to them. And they're often surprised by it. Did I really say that? Like, wow, I didn't realize that. So not only can it be useful for you, but it could be for the other person in the one-on-one setting. And then finally, experiences. So this might seem like an odd thing to include in a learning session, but one of my favorite restaurants in the city it's called Shahji's. It's a homemade Pakistani food restaurant. The interesting thing about it is it's totally word of mouth. It's hidden in this business building, 770 Jefferson, if you're ever in the city. If you didn't know it was there, you would walk right by it. So these are the things that I discovered after a couple of months of going about weekly with my friend Hassan. And so the first thing I noticed was it's hidden. There's no sign. If you don't know it's there, you don't know it's there. You can only know by being told. The second thing is there may be a line. So think about when you plan to go. If you go too late, if it's too close to noon, you're going to be in the back of the line. So be ready. That might be the only indicators. There's people standing in this weird line in this business building that you like, what is going on there, right? That might distract you. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know. The other thing I thought was it would be interesting to lay out the basic structure of their pricing, right? So they do a plate for $7 and then you can add things. You can add more rice, you can add a roti, you can add a drink, each one's $1. Really simple numbers, right? A little tip there, right? If you order extra rice, you get a bigger container and more food. And then this is the basic menu. So I could produce this and email this to a friend. So if I felt someone was qualified to go visit Shahji, I would send this in an email to them and they could, in a few minutes, understand where it's at, what it's like, the pricing and the menu, right? In a few moments. So that was a fun way to capture the things that I learned by experience in a visual way. And I'll show you one more thing. As I went for a while, like in Milwaukee, people aren't used to spicy food. I love spicy food. And I thought it would be valuable to share with them the spice level. So if they went there, they would know what to order and maybe what to avoid. The chicken masala is relatively spicy for a Wisconsin palate. I love it. And then you go down the scale. Saag paneer is a little less, dal is less, and then basmati rice is cool, right? So it's a fun way to represent information, in this case, to share with others, right? I'm sharing my experience with others so they can learn. But it's a really quick way to, if you scan these two things, you would know a lot about this business in a short amount of time. So the last thing I'm going to talk about here are two approaches to learning. So number one are sketchnoting templates. They're great for beginners. And what I'm going to show you is this sample. And part of this, Piyush, I have a PDF document that I'm going to share with everyone who's on the call. It's designed for teachers, but it's got all kinds of cool things. It's got samples from my book. It's got worksheets. One of the things in there are these two templates you can use. And the idea is that you download these PDFs and you print them. They'll print out in either letter size or A4 with, your printer adjusts. And there's two of them. One is a 2-column format and one is radial. And the way they work is I've just defined a section for the title. And the 2-column, the title on the top. text and sketches are separate from each other. And this is for really early beginners who have a hard time mixing visuals and writing together. Often that can be a real challenge mentally. So for them, I produce a really simple column where you maybe could even do the text first, reflect on it, and then put your sketches on the right side. On the right, you'll see there's the radio template where you've got the title in the center, and then circling around it are text and sketches as you wish as a structure. And the way they work is you print them out, and then you lay a sheet of white printer paper right on top of them. The interesting thing is, because they're bold lines, they actually show through as like light gray. They give you some structure that you can use, and then do your sketch note right on top of it. Right? It gives you just enough that you don't have to, like, there's one less thing to worry about, which is layout. The layout's been sorted for you. You just simply follow the structure and fill it in. And when you fill up the page, you're done, right? And that's another challenge, is to know that balance. The other cool thing is, if you're using this template, this could be great for kids, is when you slide the page off the template, it looks like you had this really great control and you had this structure in place, but the template is slid away, so you don't know how you arrived at it. It's a little bit like our lettering, right? You build your own framework and then you hide it by filling in the lettering. In the same way, you're using these templates to hide that you relied on something. And at some point, as you build up your skills, you may not even need these templates anymore. That's really the goal. They're like training wheels on a bicycle. You need them for a while, and then once you get the feel for it, you can take them off and then go with the flow. You can also be inspired by these templates and create your own. Build them in Word or PowerPoint and print them out. So if you wanted to try a different structure, you're certainly free to do that. And once you see how they work, then it makes lots of sense and you can do that. So these are really cool technique. I use this in my workshops a lot. It really helps new people approach it. I think it's really helpful for students, especially, to have a structure that they should follow until they're ready to explore and do things on their own. So I can't recommend these enough. And of course, we'll include the link to this document for everyone on the call, along with the slides from this deck.
Sorry to cut you off. I want to give you a quick notification. If you have the link, then I can share it right away on chat.
Okay.
And, we are also at 4 o'clock. We have passed 2 minutes.
Right.
We all are loving it. I won't mind extending it. So if you have more content, just keep going on, and we are loving learning. But this is just to tell you that we are on time. I mean, we are.
And I can see that happening. This is my last slide, really, before Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
So we can leave a little time for Q&A. The last thing I will recommend is Sketchnote flashcards. You can see the structure that I'm imagining. On one side, you have a Sketchnote. On the other side, you have words. If you want to learn language, you draw the image, and then you write the words, in this case, English, Spanish, German, right? And you can use these solo or with someone else. Some of the notes. Yeah, the good thing about making your own is you choose the topic. You can make it about anything. If you want to teach your kids HTML, you could, have the symbol on the front and sketch it, and then, or maybe even show like how it works and see if they can divine it, right? It also helps you recall when you build these, because you're processing all the information. Index cards are really cheap. Even the lined ones work really well. So you could use the blank side for the sketch and the line side for the text. You can add to the deck as you want to. So if you learn all the things and you want to extend it, you can add more to it. And then of course, it's easy to practice by yourself or with somebody else. So I think this is a really helpful tool for learning a topic if you choose to. Hey, there we go. Very clear. So we are at Q&A. I imagine there may be some questions. I know we're right at time. We are recording this, so if you need to go, feel free to go, and we'll record the questions. And Piyush, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask questions. I'm going to turn off my share in a minute. Actually, I'm going to keep the share up because, or I'll come back to it because I've got some codes for people.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay,
I'm here to answer some questions
now, and let me see if we have any questions.
Okay.
So what Martha from Pennsylvania is asking, when you sketch for a conference, do you know the agenda beforehand?
I try to. So because I'm often brought in, I can request those things. Often they'll send me the PowerPoint deck ahead of time. So that's an advantage of being hired to do something. But you can also find this stuff out often on a website. So they usually have an agenda. You can find out who the speaker is and when they're going to run. Mm-hmm. And then you can look them up. So my friend Rob DeMio, he's a physicist. He found when he did sketchnoting of very technical scientific topics. He has scientists that comes to his installation. So he'll find out who the people are he wants to see ahead of time, because they, show you what's happening. He'll actually do research on the people, find out what their concepts are. He'll read up on their ideas to understand what they're thinking about. Because in a technical situation, like with scientific things, it can get really technical very fast. So for him, having this baseline of understanding helps him sketchnote in the moment. So you can do the same kind of thing, maybe to a lesser degree. Go to the event's website. You could even email the organizer and see if they have an agenda they would share or information to sort of prepare you.
Yeah, true. A question I think which might be a common question is that, Mike, when you are doing a live scribing, then how do you know, how are you confident about the frame and the dimensions? Because maybe you filled half of the sheet with one information and later on the speaker had so many more to speak on. Then how do you manage the space of your page?
That I covered in a previous webinar. In a quick answer, I think about sketchnotes in two dimensions. One is space and time. So if you think about, let's say I'm using a notebook, you've got 2 pages. I think about, I take the 2 pages and I divide it in quarters. And I think, okay, let's see, I'm going to do 1 hour. I've got 2 pages. So if I think about it, it's about a half an hour per page. And if I further divide each half an hour in half, then it's about 15 minutes per quarter. So as I'm working, if I see that I'm exceeding that quarter, I have a sense that maybe I need to simplify something else, or maybe it's so interesting that in 15 minutes I filled a page. Now I make the decision, okay, I'm going to go to 2 more pages. Maybe it's so rich that I need to shift and do 2 more pages. Yeah. So that would be a quick rule of thumb. I think the other thing that you might consider if you're doing it professionally, I don't know the context, a lot of times you could do the live sketchnoting and let your notes be imperfect. And if you know you're being paid to do this, you might go back and redo them, like reprocess the information. Maybe in a less intense environment, you can make a decision that, that is not as important as I thought it was in the moment. I'm not going to include it in the final version. And you redraw it. The advantage there too is that you're actually reprocessing the information and understanding it a little better, maybe seeing some new connections. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, yeah. Very true. Thanks for taking this question up, Mike. I'm asking again, I'm reading again. What changes do you make when you move from sketch noting in a notebook to graphic recording on a whiteboard? So difference.
That's a good question. And I hadn't had to face that because when I started out, I focused a lot on small scale, right? Notebooks, maybe no more than A5 or A4 single sheets or something like that. And then I was asked to come and actually sketchnote on a whiteboard. So I faced that challenge. The big challenge you're going to face is scale difference. And that this is true going in either direction. I can imagine that people that work at scale on large sheets might feel really constrained and cramped on an iPad screen or in a notebook, right? You want to spread out, and all your tools are oriented for this large scale. You're using Neuland markers with like if I was going to work on a whiteboard, I would do some practicing using the tools I'm going to use. One tip I would say is bring your own whiteboard markers. I never trust whiteboard markers in a room, in an office, because inevitably they're dried out or not dark. So I now carry my own whiteboard markers in my own case because I know that they're going to work, right? And then scale is the big question. And finally then too, if you typically use lots of colors on your small scale sketch note, you may want to limit yourself in a large scale just to so you're trying to keep the cognitive load of doing this as low as possible so you don't have too much hitting you. So by limiting your color choices on a whiteboard, not only are you dealing with size difference, but then you limit the tools that you're using so you don't have another thing to worry about.
Got it. Cool. So I think I will respect time unless if you have more questions. I have just sent you the link of the form. As I said earlier, please fill that form. It won't take you more than 20 seconds. And it really gives us the feedback, the speaker, the feedback that how was the session. It has just 3 or 4 easy questions. I'm again sharing the link of the form. And Mike, if you can share your link to the PDFs on my WhatsApp, then I will share it in the WhatsApp group with everyone.
Surely will. And, if you have questions, you can, I'm available on social media, so you can certainly ask questions. I wanted to share this with 2 things before I go. There is a discount code if you want to buy my books at peachpit.com, 40% off. It gets it close to Amazon prices, which is not always easy to do. Both the Sketchnote handbook and the workbook are available, and Rohde for you will get you 40% off of that. And then the last thing I'll mention before I go is the Sketchnote Idea Book is available. We fulfilled all our Kickstarter backers. So if you're looking for a notebook that's designed for sketchnoters, this is a great tool. It's tough. It's got really good paper and features, thoughtful features that are designed for people to do sketchnoting. So check out sketchnoteideabook.com and you can find that. So thank you, everyone. This has been really fun, and I hope that you've gotten some good thoughts and ideas and inspiration to do learning. And as I said, I'm available on social, so reach out. And if your question wasn't answered here, we'll find a way to answer it. So no worries about that.
Absolutely. And trust me, the personality, what Mike Rohde is, he is fabulous and so easy to talk to. I never felt like I'm talking to a celebrity.
Well, just because I'm not a celebrity.
In the visual world, you are, Mike. And just reach out to him on he's on Instagram or on Facebook, and you will get your answers. Cool. Yep. Thank you, Mike, for really thankful to you that you had spent time with us and you agreed to be one of our speakers.
This is so much fun. I always love these things.
I will be sharing with you a quick screen share to tell you about our speaker tomorrow. So if you can see my screen, you can see my screen, right? So
yes.
He is Holger Niels, and he will be talking to you about how to use visual tools to solve problems. And these are day-to-day work problems which you face in office. So he'll be talking about visual tools to solve problems. So don't miss this session tomorrow. It will be equally entertaining as we had all those sessions in this boot camp. Yeah. With this, I am closing my screen share.
Holger is great. He's a really fantastic guy.
Yeah.
Very encouraging guy.
So with this, I thank you all that you had spent time with us and didn't mind a little extension of time. When we have good learnings, we don't mind extending times, right? Great. Agalya and Natasha, do you have anything to add to this, or we can close then?
I think we are fine.
Okay.
I am going to, I will definitely get the link for this document for you guys, and you can download it. So
yes, we will send it.
Make sure you get that.
Yeah. So you can all leave the meeting, and Mike, if you can be with us for 10 more minutes with me and the organizers. Mm-hmm. And then oh, by the way, photo movement, I forgot. So our photo movement is visuals at work. So if you can do this, I'll take a quick picture of all of you, bring your fingers close to the camera, and I'll take the pictures. So wait.
I think so.
Here it goes. Yeah. Took one, yes. And I'm taking another one now. Yeah, got it. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Yeah, and
that's my live scribe. There.
Thank you all. Bye-bye, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Nice, Natasha.
Yeah, I'm just showing my live scribe.
Yeah, can you please show?
Oh, yes, I missed it. So this is Natasha's. I'm putting you on spotlight, Natasha. This is Natasha's live scribe.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Yes. Yes.
Nice.
I love your style. I love your style.
Thank you, Mike. I have learned a lot from you. I am like a huge follower of your. I follow you everywhere. YouTube, books, everything.
I just posted. I finally found out a way to get I call it the teacher pack.